At 18, she was given, still a maiden, to a widowed rancher with 3 children. What happened shocked all. At just 18, she had never imagined that her life would change so completely in a single day. Her name was Lila, and she had grown up in a small, dusty village surrounded by rolling fields and distant hills. The village was a quiet place where everyone knew each other, and life moved slowly with the rhythm of the seasons. I would be so happy. From the moment she could walk, Lila had spent her days helping her mother with household chores, running errands to the market, and caring for her younger siblings. Her father had died when she was very young, leaving her mother to manage the family alone. Despite the hardships, Lila had always been a cheerful and hopeful girl, dreaming of a life filled with kindness and purpose. But that day, everything felt heavy. Her mother had been quiet for weeks, and the village elders had been talking in hushed tones whenever she passed. Lila did not fully understand what was coming, though she sensed it had something to do with her future. The whispers in the village grew louder each day, and soon she learned the truth. Her mother, pressured by circumstances and the advice of the elders, had agreed to a marriage for her, not with a boy her age, not even with a man she had ever met, but with a widowed rancher who lived on the outskirts of a neighboring town. The thought made her heart pound. She had heard of the man, Mr. Armand, though only in passing. He was in his late 30s, a strong, silent figure who had lost his wife a few years ago. He had 3 children, 2 boys and a little girl, and rumors suggested that life on his ranch was hard, demanding, and lonely. Some villagers even whispered that the rancher was stern and not easy to please. Lila felt a swirl of emotions, fear, curiosity, and a strange sense of responsibility. She would be stepping into a completely unknown world, leaving behind everything familiar, her mother, her siblings, her friends, and the home where she had grown up. Her mother tried to comfort her, though her own eyes were filled with worry. "Lila," she said softly, "I know it feels sudden and frightening, but you are strong. This marriage, it is not just about duty. You may find happiness there, more than we can imagine. You must trust yourself and trust him." Her words were gentle, but they could not erase the tight knot in Layla's stomach. The morning of her departure was quiet. She packed her few belongings carefully, folding each piece of clothing and placing them neatly in a small worn suitcase. She packed a handkerchief her mother had embroidered for her, a simple locket with a picture of her father, and a small notebook where she had written her thoughts and dreams. Every item she packed seemed to carry a piece of her life, and saying goodbye felt like leaving parts of herself behind. The villagers gathered to see her off. Some offered kind words and blessings, others simply watched with curiosity or pity. The journey to the ranch was long and bumpy. Layla traveled by wagon, bouncing along dirt roads that stretched past golden fields and forests. She looked out at the passing scenery with wide eyes, feeling both awe and nervousness. She had never been far from her village, and the world beyond it seemed vast and mysterious. The air smelled of earth and grass, and birds flew overhead as if guiding her toward a new life. When she finally arrived at the ranch, she could see it perched on a hill, surrounded by wooden fences and open fields where horses grazed. The ranch itself was large, made of rough-hewn timber and stone, with a wide porch that stretched along the front. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the faint sound of children's laughter reached her ears. Her heart beat faster. This was where she would live, where she would try to build a new life, and where she would become part of a family she did not yet know. Stepping off the wagon, she saw Mr. Armand for the first time. He was taller than she expected, with broad shoulders and a strong presence. His face was serious, framed by dark hair that had hints of silver at the temples. There was sadness in his eyes, a quiet weight that told of his past struggles. He nodded politely, introducing himself with a calm voice, and she felt both intimidated and relieved by his gentle manner. The children peeked from behind the door, shy and uncertain. The oldest boy, no more than 10, watched her closely, trying to decide whether she was a friend or a stranger. The younger boy clutched his sister's hand, and the little girl, barely 6, hid behind the corner of the wall, her wide eyes filled with curiosity and caution. The first hours in the house were awkward. Layla followed the rancher's instructions, helping with small tasks, cleaning the kitchen, and trying to remember the layout of the large, unfamiliar home. The children were hesitant, sometimes speaking to her, sometimes retreating to their own corners. Lila tried to smile and speak gently, introducing herself and asking about their days. She found herself speaking in a soft, encouraging tone, hoping to earn their trust. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but she felt a small spark of hope every time one of the children responded to her kindness. Evening came, and Lila sat alone on the porch, watching the sunset over the fields. She could hear the faint sounds of the animals settling for the night and the wind rustling through the trees. She thought about her family, wondering how they were coping with her absence, and she whispered a quiet prayer for courage. Her mind raced with questions. Would she ever be able to connect with the children? Could she earn the respect of the rancher? Would she be happy here, or would life be too hard to bear? The unknown pressed on her, heavy and constant, yet, beneath the fear, there was a flicker of determination. She would try. She had to. The first night in the new home was lonely. The rooms were large and unfamiliar, and the silence felt deep. Lila lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house, the creaking of the floorboards, the occasional call of an animal outside, the soft breathing of the children in the next room. She missed the warmth of her mother's embrace and the familiarity of her village. Yet she reminded herself that this was her chance to grow, to prove her strength, and to create a place for herself in this new family. The days that followed were filled with learning. Lila had to adjust to a new routine, rising early to help with the chores around the ranch, feeding the animals, cleaning the stables, and preparing meals. She discovered the rhythm of ranch life, where each day demanded hard work and patience. At first she struggled, often tiring by mid-morning, but she did not give up. She remembered her mother's words about strength and perseverance, and each task she completed gave her a quiet sense of accomplishment. Gradually, small connections began to form. The children started to respond to her gently spoken words, and the rancher noticed her attentiveness and care. Lila's quiet courage and determination were beginning to make a subtle difference in the household. Though there were still moments of doubt, fear, and longing for her old life, she felt a sense of purpose growing within her. She realized that even in this new, challenging environment, she had the power to make a positive impact, to touch hearts and perhaps, in time, become a beloved part of this family. By the end of that first week, the initial tension in the house had softened just a little. Lila had learned some of the children's routines and begun to find ways to make them smile. She had gained a small measure of trust from the rancher, who had started speaking to her with quiet respect, acknowledging her efforts. And though she was still nervous, she had begun to feel that perhaps, just perhaps, this marriage could become something more than just a duty. In the quiet of the evening, sitting once again on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lila allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. She was far from home, far from everything familiar, but she felt something she had never felt before, a sense of possibility. Her life had changed forever, and though the road ahead would not be easy, she had taken her first steps into a new chapter, carrying courage, kindness, and hope in her heart. Lila's second week at the ranch brought with it new challenges. The house, though large, still felt foreign, and every corner reminded her that she was no longer in her village. The children, though slowly warming up, remained cautious. The oldest boy, Rehan, watched her with a serious expression, as if trying to decide whether she was someone to trust or fear. The middle child, Sammy, was quieter, often hiding behind Rehan, his big brown eyes observing everything silently. And little Hannah, the youngest, was curious but shy, peeking around corners and darting away if Lila came too close. The rancher, Mr. Armand, remained polite but distant. He spoke to her when necessary, giving instructions about the household, the animals, and the land. He had a stern voice, but it was not unkind. Lila noticed the care in his tone whenever he mentioned the children's needs or the condition of the ranch. She realized that beneath his serious exterior he carried a deep love for his children and a weight of responsibility that sometimes made him seem unapproachable. Lila's days began early. Before the sun rose, she was already up, helping in the kitchen while the rancher prepared for his morning work. She fed the chickens, gathered fresh eggs, and helped milk the cows, though she had little experience. Her hands were raw from the work, and her muscles ached, but she endured, knowing that this was part of becoming a member of the family. She often reminded herself of her mother's words, "Strength comes from patience and perseverance." The children's reactions varied. Rehan tested her limits, challenging her instructions and questioning her presence. "Why are you here?" he asked one morning, his voice a mix of curiosity and defiance. Lila paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because I am here to help," she said gently. "And I want to care for all of you, just as I would if you were my own brothers and sister." The boy looked at her silently for a moment, then shrugged and went outside, still cautious but no longer openly hostile. Sammy and Hannah were slower to respond. Lila spent time with them quietly, reading stories, helping with simple chores, and listening to their small worries. She learned their favorite games, their favorite foods, and the little habits that made each child unique. Slowly, she became a familiar presence in their lives, someone who did not demand their attention but offered kindness and understanding. Despite these small victories, Lila often felt lonely. Evenings were the hardest. She would sit on the porch, looking out at the fields as the sun dipped behind the hills, thinking about her family back in the village. She missed her mother's voice, the laughter of her siblings, and the familiar smells of her home. Yet, she knew that this was her life now. She could not turn back. Her future lay here with the rancher and his children, and she had to find a way to belong. One afternoon, as she was tending to the garden, a sudden problem arose. A horse had gotten loose, running across the field in a panic. Layla froze, unsure of what to do. She had never handled a frightened horse alone. Rehan and Sammy ran after it, calling out, but the horse was fast and it seemed impossible to catch. Lila's heart raced, but she remembered what she had learned from the rancher. Stay calm, think carefully, and act. She grabbed a rope, approached the horse slowly, speaking in a soft, soothing voice. Inch by inch, she managed to calm it, and with Rehan and Sammy's help, they secured the animal safely. When the rancher came to see what had happened, he looked at Lila with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "You handled that well," he said simply. It was a small statement, but it filled her with pride. She realized that moments like these, moments where she could show courage and presence of mind, were slowly building her place in the family. Days turned into weeks, and Layla's routines became more familiar. She learned to wake before the sun, tend to the animals, prepare meals, and manage the household efficiently. She also learned the children's rhythms, noticing when they were happy, tired, or upset. She discovered that small gestures, a warm meal, a gentle word, or a shared laugh, could make a significant difference in the atmosphere of the house. The rancher, too, began to open up in small ways. He shared stories of his late wife, memories of their life together, and moments of joy and sorrow. Lila listened patiently, never judging, always offering understanding. In these conversations, she saw a man who had suffered deeply yet continued to care for his children and his land. She realized that their bond was slowly shifting from polite acknowledgement to mutual respect. The villagers continued to watch the situation with interest. Some still whispered that the young woman could never manage a household with 3 children and a demanding ranch. Others began to notice subtle changes, the children smiling more, the house running more smoothly, and the rancher appearing more at ease. Slowly, Lila's presence was proving that she was more than capable. One day, Lila decided to take a small risk. She invited the children to help her prepare a special treat, a simple cake, made with ingredients from the kitchen and garden. Rehan was hesitant at first, but curiosity won over, and soon all 3 children were involved, measuring, stirring, and laughing at small mishaps. The house was filled with the smell of baking and the sound of happy chatter. Even the rancher, who had been working outside, came in to see what was happening, and a small smile appeared on his face. The children were proud of their creation, and Lila shared her appreciation freely. "You did wonderfully," she said, placing the cake on the table. "This is our little celebration." The children beamed, and for the first time, Layla felt a sense of belonging that went beyond duty. She was not just a visitor or caretaker, she was becoming part of their lives in a meaningful way. Challenges were not gone, however. Rehan still tested boundaries, Sammy still had moments of silence that worried her, and Hannah's shyness made communication slow. There were days when chores felt overwhelming, when the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her, and when loneliness returned in the quiet evenings. But Lila had learned to face each day with determination. She reminded herself that building trust took time, patience, and consistent effort. One rainy afternoon, an unexpected situation brought Lila closer to the children. A sudden storm flooded part of the yard, trapping the chickens and small animals in their pens. The children were frightened, unsure how to help. Lila acted quickly, gathering buckets, moving animals to safety, and calming the children with her calm, confident demeanor. The rancher arrived later, soaked and worried, but he found everything under control. He looked at Lila, genuinely impressed. "You handled this better than I expected," he said quietly. The children, seeing her bravery, began to look at her with newfound respect and admiration. As the weeks turned into months, Lila's presence became a stabilizing force in the household. The children smiled more freely, played more openly, and began to confide in her about their small worries and dreams. The rancher started to rely on her advice for household decisions and even sought her opinion on matters at the ranch. Layla's life, though far from what she had imagined at 18, was beginning to take shape in a way she could be proud of. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Layla sat on the porch, the children playing quietly nearby. She looked out at the vast fields, feeling a sense of accomplishment and hope. She had faced fear, loneliness, and uncertainty, yet she had not only survived but had started to thrive. She realized that love and patience, even in small doses, could transform a home, a family, and a life. For the first time since leaving her village, Lila felt that she was not just a girl given away in marriage, but a young woman carving her place in the world. She understood that the path ahead would have more challenges, that the children and rancher would continue to test her, and that her strength would be needed in ways she could not yet imagine. Yet she also knew that she had the courage, the heart, and the determination to face whatever came next. The rancher noticed these subtle changes too. He saw how the children's laughter was more frequent, how the household ran more smoothly, and how Lila's calm presence eased tensions and brought warmth to their lives. He began to think of her not just as a young bride, but as a partner in the truest sense, someone who could share the burdens of the ranch and the joys of family life. By the end of the second month, the household had shifted from a place of uncertainty and adjustment to one of cautious harmony. Lila's efforts were paying off. The children were beginning to trust her fully, and the rancher had begun to respect her intelligence, patience, and courage. The villagers, observing from afar, started to change their opinions as well. The young woman who had been given away at 18 was proving that she could not only survive in this demanding environment, but thrive and bring out the best in those around her. And through it all, Lila never forgot the lessons she had learned in her own village: kindness, patience, courage, and the power of listening. She understood that family was not only about blood, but about care, effort. She was slowly building a new life, one filled with challenges, triumphs, and moments of quiet joy, and she felt deep in her heart that this was only the beginning of her journey. By the time Lila had settled into her third month at the ranch, the household had begun to feel less foreign. She moved through the rooms with more confidence, understanding the routines of the children and the needs of the ranch. Yet she knew that earning the true trust of the children and the rancher would take more than following chores and being polite. She had to connect with them heart to heart and show that she was someone they could rely on and love. Rayhan, the eldest, remained the most challenging. He was smart, observant, and stubborn. Every time Layla tried to teach him something, he would challenge her, sometimes with teasing words, sometimes with silence. Layla realized that Rayhan's behavior was not meant to be unkind. It was his way of protecting himself and the memory of his mother. She learned to approach him with patience, speaking calmly and giving him space when he needed it. Slowly, she began to notice small signs of trust, a nod of agreement, a quiet smile, or his willingness to help her in small tasks around the ranch. Sammy, the middle child, was quieter and more reserved. Layla knew he carried a lot of worries in his heart, often watching the others and saying little. She spent time with him in the evenings, helping him with small homework tasks, reading stories, and sometimes just sitting quietly while he played with his toys. She never rushed him to speak, but offered her presence, which gradually encouraged him to open up. One evening, Sammy told her about a dream he had, about a forest and a river, and Lila listened with care, praising his imagination and gently encouraging him to share more. That simple moment made her heart swell with hope. She realized that being patient and kind was slowly breaking down his walls. Little Hannah was the most delicate of the three. She was curious, but she was also cautious, often hiding behind her older brothers. Lila made a special effort to connect with her, learning the games Hannah liked, telling her bedtime stories, and gently teaching her small things about the garden and the animals. Hannah's trust grew in subtle ways, a laugh here, a hug there, a shy thank you when Lila helped her. Lila cherished these moments, knowing that her care was making a lasting impact. Lila also spent more time with the rancher himself. Mr. Armin was a man of few words, but Lila noticed that he began to observe her actions closely. He saw her handling chores, calming the children, and making thoughtful decisions about the ranch. Occasionally, he would ask her opinion, sometimes even a small question about the livestock or the household schedule. These moments were rare, but they were significant. Lila realized that he was starting to see her not just as a young bride, but as a capable partner who could be trusted with responsibilities and decisions. One morning, Lila noticed that the well, which provided water for the house and animals, was starting to run low. Without hesitation, she decided to fetch water from the nearby stream, even though it was farther than usual. She gathered buckets, tied them to the wagon, and prepared to make the journey. The children insisted on helping, and for the first time, Rayhan volunteered to ride with her. Lila smiled, realizing that this small act of cooperation showed his growing trust. Along the way, they sang songs and laughed at small jokes, and even the usually quiet Sammy joined in. Hannah held tightly to Lila's hand, her eyes wide with wonder at the flowing stream. Returning to the ranch, Buckets full of water, Lila noticed the rancher watching from the porch. When she approached him, he nodded, a small but genuine smile on his face. "Good work," he said simply. Lila felt a surge of pride. It was a small acknowledgement, but it meant the world. She realized that earning respect was not about grand gestures, but about consistent effort, courage, and care. Days passed with similar challenges and victories. Lila continued to teach the children not just about chores, but about life, how to care for animals, how to respect one another, and how to face difficulties with patience and courage. She encouraged them to speak their minds respectfully, to share their feelings, and to support one another. Slowly, the household atmosphere began to shift. Laughter became more common, meals were shared with joy rather than tension, and the rancher appeared less burdened and more open to small moments of happiness. One particularly cold evening, a small crisis tested the family's growing bond. A storm had rolled in unexpectedly, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. The youngest animals were frightened, the fences shook, and the children were scared. Lila quickly organized the children, guiding Rehan and Sammy to secure the animals and help her keep little Hana safe. She moved calmly, despite her own fear, speaking gently and encouragingly. The rancher joined in as well, working alongside them rather than giving orders. Together, they managed the situation, ensuring everyone was safe and the animals were protected. After the storm passed, they sat by the fire, wet and tired, but relieved. Lila noticed the rancher watching her closely, his eyes softer than usual. "You handled that very well," he said, his voice carrying something like admiration. The children saw Lila as someone who could protect them, guide them, and care for them, even in frightening situations. The rancher began to see her strength, intelligence, and courage in a new light. Lila herself realized that she was no longer just a visitor in this family. She was becoming an essential part of it. Lila also began to bring small joys into the household. She started baking treats with the children, planting flowers around the house, and even decorating the porch with simple handmade decorations. Each small gesture made the ranch feel more like a home rather than just a house. The children looked forward to these activities, and the rancher, though quiet, appreciated the warmth she brought. It was in these small moments that true family bonds were forming, unnoticed by the world but deeply felt by those within the home. There were still challenges. Rehan's stubbornness could flare up, Sammy's shyness could make him retreat, and Hannah's curiosity sometimes led to trouble. Layla faced moments of exhaustion, frustration, and doubt. But each time, she reminded herself of why she was there, to help this family heal, grow, and find happiness again. She learned to balance discipline with affection, patience with firmness, and guidance with freedom. Through this balance, the children began to flourish, and the rancher's confidence in her grew. Lila also took the time to learn about the rancher's life before she arrived. She listened to his stories about his late wife, his challenges as a single father, and his hopes for the children. She never judged, never criticized, only listened with empathy and understanding. These conversations, though sometimes quiet and brief, created a bridge between them. Layla realized that understanding and respecting the past was essential to building a future together. By the end of this part of her journey, Lila had become more than a caretaker or a young bride. She had become a confidant, a guide, and a steady presence in the lives of the children and the rancher. The household was no longer a place of uncertainty and fear, but one of growing trust, care, and warmth. Layla knew that there would still be trials ahead, but she felt stronger, wiser, and more capable than she had ever imagined at 18. And in quiet moments when the children were asleep and the rancher was busy with his work, Lila would sit on the porch, looking at the vast fields stretching out into the distance. She thought about how far she had come, from a nervous young girl leaving her village to a young woman who was slowly shaping a family and a home. Her heart swelled with hope, determination, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her efforts were beginning to bear fruit. Life on the ranch was not easy, and it would never be simple. But Lila had discovered something precious. That love, patience, courage, and care could transform fear into trust, strangers into family, and a house into a home. And with each passing day, she felt herself becoming more deeply rooted in this new life, ready to face whatever challenges and joys awaited her next. The summer had been unusually dry, and the ranch, though well-maintained, began to show signs of strain. The fields were parched, the animals restless, and the streams that usually provided water had slowed to a trickle. Lila woke before dawn each day, checking on the livestock, fetching water, and making sure the children were fed and dressed for the long hours ahead. She had grown used to the chores, but this was different. This was a challenge that tested not only her physical strength, but her patience, wisdom, and courage. One morning, as the sun rose in a golden haze, Layla noticed smoke rising from the far side of the property. At first she thought it was a small fire in the distance, perhaps a controlled burn, but as she moved closer she realized it was spreading rapidly. A section of the dry grassland had caught fire, and the flames were moving quickly toward the barns and the stables where the animals were kept. Panic surged in her chest, but Layla knew she could not freeze. She had to act. She ran to alert the rancher. Mr. Armin, upon hearing the news, immediately grabbed his coat and rushed outside. The children, frightened, gathered around Lila, who spoke in calm, steady tones to reassure them. "Stay close to me," she said. We're going to be okay. We will take care of each other." Her voice, though gentle, carried authority, and the children obeyed, trusting her despite their fear. The rancher and Layla quickly organized a plan. Buckets of water were fetched from the well, and the children were guided to help in small ways, filling pails, moving smaller animals to safety, and staying out of the path of the flames. Lila worked tirelessly, running from the barns to the fences, dousing flames where they could, and directing Rayan and Sammy with clear instructions. Anna clung to her side, wide-eyed but safe, as Lila reassured her. The fire grew stronger, and the wind shifted unexpectedly, pushing flames toward the main barn where some of the animals were still trapped. Lila's heart pounded, but she refused to panic. She climbed onto a stack of hay, calling out to the animals, calming them with her voice and guiding them towards safety. The rancher, working alongside her, began to see her courage and leadership in a way he had not before. She was not just following instructions. She was making decisions, taking risks, and protecting his children and property with skill and bravery. Hours passed in a blur of smoke, heat, and exhaustion. Lila's arms ached from carrying water and guiding frightened animals. Her clothes were damp with sweat, and her lungs burned from the smoke. Yet she continued, driven by determination and a deep sense of responsibility. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the fire was brought under control. The barn had suffered some damage, but the animals were safe, and the main house and surrounding property were untouched. The rancher stood silently, watching Lila as she finally sank to the ground, her face streaked with soot and sweat. He walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I've never seen anyone handle a situation like that," he said quietly, his voice filled with awe. Lila looked up, exhausted but smiling. "I just did what needed to be done," she replied simply. In that moment, she realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the strength to act despite it. The children, seeing her bravery, ran to hug her. Rayan, who had often been distant and challenging, embraced her tightly. "You saved everything," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Sammy and Hannah clung to her as well, their trust and love evident in their eyes. Layla felt a warmth in her heart unlike anything she had experienced before. She had not only protected the ranch and animals, but had earned the deepest trust and affection of the children. That evening, as the family gathered inside the main house, the rancher spoke to Lila with a tone of respect and gratitude. "You were incredible today," he said. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Lila blushed, not out of vanity, but because the acknowledgement meant more than she could express. She realized that she had become an integral part of this family, not because of her age, youth, or appearance, but because of her heart, courage, and unwavering dedication. The days that followed were filled with repair work. Lila helped clean up soot and debris, mended fences, and made sure the animals were comfortable and well fed. The children assisted, now more confident and willing to take responsibility, following Lila's patient guidance. Together, they transformed the aftermath of the disaster into a lesson in teamwork, resilience, and the importance of caring for one another. The villagers who had heard of the fire and Lila's actions began to speak differently of her. The young woman who had arrived at 18, uncertain and shy, was now known for her courage, intelligence, and determination. They whispered not of her youth or her inexperience, but of her strength and her ability to protect and care for a family. Lila's reputation as a capable and brave young woman grew, and even the rancher's neighbors began to admire her dedication. Amidst the hard work, small moments of joy returned to the ranch. Lila baked bread and treats for the family, organized small games for the children, and even managed to plant a few flowers along the porch to brighten the days. These small gestures brought laughter and warmth back into the household, showing that life, even after hardship, could still hold beauty and happiness. The rancher began to open up more as well. He shared stories of his late wife, moments of laughter, and memories of times when he had been truly happy. Lila listened, offering empathy and understanding. Through these conversations, he began to trust her not only with the children and the ranch, but with his heart. He realized that her presence had brought more than order and care. she had brought warmth, hope, and a sense of completeness that had been missing since his wife passed. One afternoon, as the sun set and painted the sky with shades of pink and gold, Lila sat on the porch with the children gathered around her. She told them stories of her village, of games she had played, and of dreams she held for the future. Rehan, usually reserved, laughed freely at one of her tales, and even Sammy joined in, his shyness forgotten for a moment. Hana, cuddled beside Lila, listened with wide-eyed wonder. In that moment, Lila realized that she had not only survived her challenges, but had created a home filled with love, trust, and joy. Even the rancher seemed lighter. He helped with chores, shared stories, and laughed at the children's antics. Though his love for his late wife would never fade, he had begun to appreciate the new happiness that Lila had brought into their lives. The family had weathered a storm together, both literally and figuratively, and the bonds between them had deepened beyond what any of them had expected. Lila herself felt a quiet pride. She had arrived at the ranch uncertain and nervous, facing skepticism from the villagers, the rancher, and even herself. She had worked tirelessly, faced fears, and learned to balance patience with courage, discipline with love, and responsibility with care. In doing so, she had transformed the household and earned the respect and trust of those she loved. As night fell and the stars appeared above the ranch, Lila reflected on how far she had come. The journey had been difficult, filled with challenges that tested her body, mind, and heart. Yet she had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident. She understood now that true strength came not from power or authority, but from the ability to face challenges with courage, to care for others with patience, and to remain steadfast in the face of fear. The fire had been a turning point, a test of character and will. Layla had passed it, not alone, but with the support of the children and the quiet presence of the rancher. Together they had survived, and in the process they had grown closer, forming a bond that could withstand any future difficulty. The next morning, Lila rose before the sun, ready to face the new day. The children woke with smiles, eager to help and learn, and the rancher greeted her with a nod of appreciation. Life on the ranch would continue to be filled with hard work, challenges, and moments of doubt, but Lila now knew that she was capable of facing whatever came her way. She had become a cornerstone of this family, a source of strength and love, and a reminder that even in the most difficult circumstances, courage, patience, and care could create something beautiful and lasting. As the day began, Layla felt a sense of peace and purpose. She had faced fear and danger, protected her family, and strengthened her bond with the children and the rancher. The journey ahead was still long, but she no longer felt uncertain or alone. She was part of this family, part of this home, and part of a story that would continue to grow in love, trust, and happiness. Months had passed since the fire, and life on the ranch had settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and comforting. The seasons were changing, and with the passing of time, the bond between Lila, the rancher, and the children had grown into something deeper and more meaningful. The home that once felt unfamiliar was now filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Lila had become not just a caretaker but the heart of the family, a presence everyone depended on and cherished. The rancher, Mr. Armand, had begun to smile more freely, his serious demeanor softening as he saw the changes in the children and in himself. He no longer saw Lila as just the young bride who had been given to him, but as a partner in every sense of the word. She had proven her courage, wisdom, and unwavering dedication, and in doing so she had transformed his life. He started to involve her more in decisions, seeking her advice on matters both big and small. Her opinions were valued, and her voice carried weight in the home, a recognition of her strength and intelligence. The children had blossomed under Lila's care. Rehan, once stubborn and cautious, had grown more open, sharing his thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. He helped with chores willingly and even took on small responsibilities on the ranch, proud to be trusted by both Lila and his father. Sammy, the quiet middle child, had become more confident and expressive. He spoke up during family discussions and even began to teach younger animals on the ranch, showing a sense of responsibility and leadership. Hana, the youngest, was no longer shy or hesitant. She ran freely through the fields, laughing and exploring, always returning to Lila for comfort and guidance. Together they had created a family that was balanced, loving, and resilient. The challenges that had once seemed insurmountable, the new household, the children's hesitations, the pressures of ranch life, had been faced and overcome. Lila had shown patience, courage, and determination, and the results were visible in every smile, every act of kindness, and every shared moment of joy. One bright morning, Lila decided to organize a small celebration on the ranch, to mark the hard work they had all done and to enjoy the simple happiness they now shared. She invited the children to help her prepare, and they eagerly took on the tasks. Rehan helped chop vegetables for a meal, Sammy gathered flowers from the garden to decorate the porch, and Hana carefully set out plates and cups. Layla supervised, guiding them gently but allowing them the freedom to contribute in their own ways. The rancher observed them from a distance, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He realized that this household, once uncertain and uneasy, was now a place of harmony and love. The children laughed together, Layla moved gracefully between them, and the rancher felt a warmth in his heart that he had not known in years. He saw not just the growth of the children, but the growth of Layla herself, how she had become wise, confident, and deeply connected to all of them. As they gathered for the meal, Layla raised a simple toast. "To family," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "To the love, patience, and courage that brought us together, and to the future we will build together." The rancher nodded, touched by her words. The children repeated the toast with giggles and smiles, and in that moment, Layla felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. She had found a place where she belonged, a family that cherished her, and a life that was meaningful and full of purpose. Over the following weeks, the ranch flourished under their combined care. The fields grew lush with new crops, the animals thrived, and the home became a place of constant warmth and activity. Layla continued to guide the children with patience and love, teaching them lessons about responsibility, kindness. She helped the rancher manage the property, offering thoughtful suggestions and practical solutions. Together, they created a partnership that was respectful, supportive, and deeply connected. The children's bond with Layla continued to strengthen. Rehan began to confide in her about his hopes and dreams, sharing stories of what he wanted to do when he grew older. Sammy, once timid, took pride in showing her the small projects he was working on, and Hana, full of curiosity and energy, sought her guidance in learning new skills. Layla listened, encouraged, and nurtured each of them, understanding that love was not only about care, but also about empowering others to grow and flourish. Even the villagers began to notice the transformation. They saw the once shy and uncertain young woman now moving confidently around the ranch, guiding the children and helping the rancher manage the property. They watched the children's laughter and the warmth that filled the home, and slowly their doubts and gossip were replaced with admiration and respect. Layla's reputation as a courageous, kind, and capable young woman spread beyond the ranch, showing that true strength and love could overcome any challenge. One quiet evening, as the family sat together on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills, the rancher spoke with a tone of reflection. "When you first came here, I wondered if this would work," he admitted, his voice gentle. "I did not know if the children would accept you, if I could trust you, or if life could feel whole again. But you have changed everything, Layla. You have brought joy, hope, and love back into this house. I cannot thank you enough." Layla felt her heart swell. She had not done this for recognition or praise. She had done it because she cared deeply for this family. But hearing his words touched her deeply. "I only did what my heart told me," she replied softly. "I wanted to help, to love, and to create a home where everyone could feel safe and happy. That is all that matters." The rancher nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. It was in this unspoken connection that their bond had truly deepened, not just as husband and wife, but as partners, friends, and companions who had faced challenges together and emerged stronger. The children, sensing the warmth between them, snuggled closer to Layla. Rehan rested his head on her shoulder. Sammy leaned against her side, and Hana held her hand tightly. Layla wrapped her arms around them, feeling the love and trust that had grown over the months. She realized that she had become not only a mother figure to the children, but also a source of strength and comfort for the rancher, a role she had embraced fully and joyfully. As the days continued, the family faced new challenges, as life on a ranch always would. There were storms to weather, animals to care for, and work to be done, but they faced each day together, supporting one another, laughing and sharing both burdens and joys. Layla had learned that happiness was not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them together, with courage, patience, and love. The children thrived under her guidance. Rehan began taking an interest in learning more about the land, helping the rancher with decisions and showing leadership among his siblings. Sammy's confidence grew and he became more expressive, sharing his thoughts and ideas openly. Hana, once shy and hesitant, became lively and curious, always eager to explore and learn. Layla's influence was evident in every small action, every word of encouragement, and every act of care she offered. The rancher, too, had changed. He had begun to trust not only Layla's abilities, but also her heart. He saw the love and dedication she had brought into their lives and recognized that she had transformed their home into a place of warmth, stability, and happiness. His respect and admiration for her deepened, and the quiet moments they shared became filled with unspoken appreciation and understanding. Together, they created a home where laughter was common, love was abundant, and trust was strong. Lila's patience, courage, and determination had transformed what once seemed uncertain into something beautiful and lasting. The family had faced fear, challenges, and doubt, but they had emerged stronger, closer, and more united than ever. In the quiet evenings, when the work of the day was done and the children were asleep, Lila would often sit on the porch with the rancher, watching the stars appear in the sky. So big, they would speak softly about their hopes, dreams, and the joys of the day. These moments were precious, filled with understanding, respect, and a shared sense of purpose. Lila realized that life on the ranch, with its challenges and rewards, had given her something she had never known, a true sense of belonging and family. And so, life continued on the ranch. Lila had arrived at 18, uncertain and nervous, stepping into a home filled with challenges, children, and a widowed rancher she barely knew. Yet through courage, patience, and love, she had transformed not only the household but also the lives of those within it. She had shown that age and experience were not the only measures of strength. Determination, care, and heart could overcome any obstacle. The children now laughed freely, the rancher smiled more often, and the home was filled with warmth and love. Lila had found her place, her purpose, and her happiness. She had become a source of strength, joy, and guidance for the family, and in doing so had created a life that was both meaningful and full of love. Looking out over the fields, Lila felt a quiet satisfaction. The journey had not been easy, but every challenge had been worth it. She had helped the family heal, grow, and thrive. She had faced fears, overcome doubts, and shown that courage and kindness could transform lives. And as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Layla knew that this was only the beginning of a life filled with love, hope, and happiness,